The Inner Game Podcast. Brought to you by the Science of Excellence. Presented by Rob Hume, the leading elite athlete mental performance coach. Unleash your power.
So I'd like to welcome Piero onto the Science of Excellence podcast, the Inner Game. So thanks again, Piero, for coming on the show. I'm really looking forward to delving inside your mind, your world as a former elite athlete, a former footballer. The purpose and the intention behind the Inner Game podcast is to, as I mentioned, is to delve inside the mind of athletes, current athletes, up and coming athletes, and former athletes, and find out what were their mental and emotional challenges that they faced throughout trying to achieve what they throughout their career, and how they dealt with those things. And I'm wanting the Inner Game podcast to become a platform where aspiring young performers like the people that you work with can come and listen to somebody like yourself and learn from the things that you did well, learn from the things that perhaps you didn't do as well, so that it can become a community where people can learn and grow from wisdom such as yourself, Piero.
Yeah, no, it sounds great what you're doing, Rob. And like I said, just want to say thanks for having me on, and looking forward to having a good chat. Yeah.
So I'd like to rewind time, if this is okay, and go back to your younger days. What was it that first drew you to start playing football? How did it start for you?
I think like most people, to be honest, kicking the ball around the house, and then that kind of develops, and you might join a school team as you get older. Then that, again, next step up, maybe you join maybe a district or a local team. But yeah, like most young kids that start their journey in any sport,
yes,
just try it a few times, and then parents or other people might see little glimpses of maybe just kicking the ball in the right manner, and just take it from there.
Yeah. A useful strategy that I use with some of the athletes that I work with is something called modelling. It's something which, when used properly, can be a really powerful tool. There's a technique that I use called the Holographic Stepping, where literally I train athletes to step inside the mind and body of athletes who they want to kind of replicate elements of their game. And when I do this, I get the athletes to identify within their specific sport that they're taking part in, who are the particular people that if they could kind of take three athletes in their sport and combine them together to make their ultimate version of themselves, like, who would they be? And I'm wondering who your footballing idols were, your footballing role models, and if there's also any role models outside of football who you kind of looked up to emulate.
Yeah, so footballing, for me, probably when I was really young, I imagine David Beckham, I think.
Yeah.
Because he was, obviously he was a big star at the time, Man United. He was everywhere. So I do remember following him, and obviously trademark free kicks, going to the park and trying to do that. So yeah, footballing wise, probably David Beckham when I was really young. And then again, as you get older, it changes.
Yeah.
I'm an AC Milan supporter. So in their best years, people like Maldini, Gattuso, Kaká, Shevchenko, all of them had little things that I liked and felt kind of an attachment to.
Yeah.
Like I say, all different strengths, different types of players, but there would just always be that their one thing. You'd be like, that's what I'd like to kind of have. And then outside of football, just pretty simple. It was my dad, to be honest, and still is. Is a big inspiration for me. I'm the biggest supporter, but for me, he's like a best friend. And so outside of football, role model wise, I couldn't have asked for a better one, to be honest.
That's fantastic, Piero. I was wondering if you could just explain to the listeners, the audience, going back from your kind of youth career, just your experiences. Can we almost have a timeline of your career, kind of when it started, where you started? I know a large part of your youth days were at Watford. I was wondering if you could kind of start from some of your earliest moments within football when you maybe joined your first academy, and just kind of give us a timeline of how your career progressed over the years.
Yeah, so I'll start back from Sunday League, playing for my local team. I was pretty shy. I wasn't really confident. So it took me a bit of time to kind of integrate and kind of actually start showing my talents at my local team. And then eventually, started to play well, maybe be one of the better players, kind of catching people's attention. And I was offered a 6-week trial at Watford. So I went along to that.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of an eye-opener from the kind of levels, from Sunday League to an academy setup.
Yeah.
And there again, you question yourself. At a young age, I was 13, 14. But, you go to the training sessions and it's all very well structured, and everybody, like simple things like ladders, and their feet are just going clean through the ladders, and you're just thinking, I don't think I've ever done a ladder before in my training sessions. So you kind of see the different levels.
Yeah.
And then again, 6 weeks, slowly build yourself up, slowly start to maybe work out that maybe you're not as far off these boys as you might have thought initially. Confidence starts to grow. Fortunately, they saw something that they felt like maybe they could work with. So I got signed up to the academy. And then the academy is it's a year-on-year job. Every year, boys get let go, and you carry on. You lose friends along the way.
Yeah,
it's just part of the system, really. You do your best for the season. You try hard, you train, and then at the end, they let you know if you're going to be there for the next year.
Yeah, and
then that takes you to obviously under 16s, which is probably the top of the academy, taking away the youth team. So an important year, and then you're kind of all in. Then you're just desperate to kind of get a full-time contract, even though you're a youth team player or scholar, but just get into the building, as they used to say, like on a full-time basis. Fortunate to get that, and then the youth team. That's when it really starts. It becomes proper.
Yeah. And what were your next progressions there then? So when you kind of get into that youth team, kind of, how did it go from there for you?
Youth team wise, you of course get the contract. You want to be full time. You mix football with education.
Yeah.
So we'll go in college 1.5 days a week, and then the rest we'll train him. Then as a first year scholar, you just want to kind of establish yourself in the team. Because there's first years and the second, so the older boys make up the majority of the team sometimes. So your aim is to try and get into that team on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So I've done that. Had some good memories with FA Youth Cup, and then of course, you sign a 2-year contract with most of the time with a youth contract. Then you go into the second year, which it's all about proving yourself, not to your coaches now, but also to the coaches above that. At the time, I've been reserve coaches, assistant managers of the first team coach. And I was fortunate to have some good times. There's some good seasons. And again, I got offered a pro contract. Wasn't all glitz and glams. It was the importance was that they wanted you to be a professional. You didn't really care about the other stuff.
Yeah.
And then from then on, you just go again. And it's just kind of every time we're just level to try and push on through.
So how long did you end up spending with Watford in the, in the professional ranks, with the first team? You got some games, you played, some first team football at Watford, didn't you?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough in my first season, which now I probably look back and think it probably wasn't as much of a good thing as I thought, that I actually managed to get some appearances in. And like I say, now I think it would have been better off if maybe I went out on loan and developed more, because it almost gave me a false sense of belonging, where in reality I wasn't at that level.
Really?
To be able to do it consistently.
Yeah.
They had, at the time with Watford, they didn't have kind of maybe the money or the budgets they had now, so it was a different ownership. So it was focused more on good players, good first team players, and then the rest were made up by academy lads. So we were fortunate enough to be involved quite a lot. And I stayed there for 3 years as a professional. And then I moved on when the new ownership come in, and of course they kind of had an influx of players. So we had to kind of make space, and in one way it was probably a good thing, because I went on to play kind of regular men's football instead of maybe just doing nothing there, to be honest.
Yeah. So where was your next club after Watford then? Was it Accrington, or was there another phase before that?
So yeah, Accrington. When my contract ended with Watford, I went to Accrington. James Beattie was my manager.
Right. Cool.
And that was, of course, it was a complete opposite to what I was used to. You couldn't have made any more opposite. It was the other end of the country. I'd never been outside the M25 for longer than a day. Watford training ground was 15 minutes from my parents' house where I was living. I had to go live by myself in Accrington. I didn't know where Accrington was, in all honesty, as much as I kind of love the place now. I've got good memories, but at the time, like I say, young boy, I didn't know too much about it. And in all honesty, I didn't know too much about the lower leagues. No. Not as much as maybe they're covered now, regular coverage and all that sort of stuff. At the time, I didn't know too much about it. So, yeah, it was a complete wake-up call as well. Really? When you get let go from a team at Watford at the time in the Championship, and that's all I've ever known, you think I should be able to kind of get another club. And then you realise the summer's going by and you're waiting for phone calls and no one's really calling. Because I didn't really have a CV, to be honest. Yeah. I played, 5 or 6 games in 3 years. Yeah. So that's when I go back to saying I possibly should have gone on loan. Yeah. To build up a CV. Yeah. To either impress, to go back to Watford, or at least other clubs get to know you, other managers get to see you in men's football. Okay, and just listen to you talk about that there. I'd imagine that for any young up and coming footballer who does kind of get that contract at 16 and 18, that what you've said there is probably a piece of really valuable advice for them. Would you think that's the sort of thing that you would recommend to some of the footballers that you coach if they were to get into your position, and even footballers who you don't coach, just people listening and watching, would you think that would be a great piece of advice for them to go out and get that exposure, get some loan games, and get your face known? Yeah, I think from as young age as possible, get exposure to men's football. Yeah. Because it's completely different to 23s or 18s. Yeah. And even if it goes wrong and you have a bit of a stinker on your loan, but you'll learn so much. Yeah. Like sitting around at a big club, training, but not actually playing much. I can't explain how much development you're actually missing out on. Yeah. Where if you had 2 players just training for a year, basically, maybe playing the odd game here and there, than someone who's gone on loan and plays 20 games, 30 games.
Yeah.
In the first team.
Yeah.
The development must be frightening.
Yeah. And would you even recommend, say somebody was in your scenario, in around in a championship sort of team or in around that level as an 18, 19-year-old, would you even recommend, even, if they had to drop down to, that fifth tier below Division 2, would you think that would also, be something? Is it worthwhile dropping down that level to get that experience and that exposure as well, would you say?
Yeah, I think any of those leagues now they're all top leagues.
Yeah.
So you kind of need to drop that ego and think that maybe you're too good, to go there.
Yeah.
Get yourself down there and prove that you are too good, and then you'll go up.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of boys will find the reality check.
Yeah.
That you drop down to these levels thinking, it's going to be very easy.
Yeah.
But there's hundreds and hundreds of players that come from the same background you did.
Yeah.
So everybody can play. Everyone's got their own stories. Some people might be there because of injuries or other mistakes, or there's good players in every division in the country, trust me.
Yeah. And do you think the reason why you didn't go out on loan, was it because just maybe lack of advice from other people at the club? Was it like the fact that it was maybe in your comfort zone, or, no offense, was there a bit of that ego there in yourself thinking, I don't want to go down there? Was it any of those three things, or none of them, or something different?
Yeah, so I don't think it was an ego thing. I think it was just naivety. I just didn't, like I said, I didn't really have much knowledge of the lower leagues, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't even, it didn't even come to my head. At the time, if you would have said to me League One and League Two, I would have been like, well, that's rubbish. But not because I knew it was rubbish. It's because I've only ever seen Watford Academy.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen anything else. So I didn't know. And then, like I said to you, the worst thing was probably getting those games initially.
Yeah.
Because then it makes you think like, well, I'm really, really close.
Yeah.
But you're not.
Yeah.
So that's why I say it should have been the other way around, where maybe you go out on loan, develop. Yeah. And then maybe if you do play, you might be able to stay in because you've closed the gap in your development.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That so many and even since times have moved on since your times as a 16, 17, 18-year-old. It's an even different world now, isn't it? So I'd imagine that bubble, that under 18s, under 20s, under 21s are in an even kind of more enclosed bubble as to what life is. If you've been in one of those Cat 1 academies, those top academies, that I'd imagine that they really are kind of in a bubble that isn't conducive to actually probably going out and making it as a pro. And
I think that's risky business.
Yeah,
to be honest, because every player I meet, every young player, I always start off with, I genuinely hope you go and win the World Cup and achieve the greatest you can achieve in the game. But unfortunately, not everybody's going to do that.
No.
And people are going to have careers like I did, and other people, all different levels. But the more you get caught up in that bubble, especially in maybe those big clubs, it's luxury from 9 years old.
Yeah.
You have the best pitches, the best football boots, the best balls, the best goals.
Yeah.
If you do have to change, it could be, like I say, risky business, because it can be a huge shock. And you might not have too much time to adapt, because in football, you're constantly being judged. And a month, 2 months, 3 months, it goes pretty quickly. Yeah. And football doesn't wait for no one, unfortunately.
No. It's... We, in some respects, we're potentially living in a generation where, we're not as strong, mentally, emotionally, to handle some of these challenges. And if you, we all of us, need to go through, the school of hard knocks. That's where we that's where we grow, and that's where we learn the most, isn't it? You've got to expose yourself and challenge yourself, and take yourself out of your comfort zone. And in those moments of stepping out of your comfort zone, that's when you really find out who you are, isn't it? And if you've not had these, gradual experiences, two different environments, if the stress is too big psychologically, you're not going to be able to handle it. The mind, the body can only handle so much, so much stress. And if you've never been really exposed to, real stress, and by stress, I mean like pressure, high intense pressure or a different type of pressure, then athletes and people haven't developed the habits, the mental skills to kind of deal with it. And this is a big part of what I do, is trying to help people develop the confidence to step out into these environments and handle it confidently, because often athletes, it's the doubt sometimes which stops them taking those risks. Because if, as you were saying, if you've come up through these, the top academies, and you can build up this, almost like a false sense of belief in yourself, but really underneath that is this kind of doubt, about yourself that stops you going into these new environments, and testing yourself. And sometimes that's the problem, that deep down there is a bit of a lack of belief in themselves. So they stay in their comfort zone and not go and take that risk in case they go down, and then they are woken up to something that they don't really want to admit to themselves. So I'd just like to, move on from that though. That line of conversation. I was wondering, what's your defining moment that you've experienced in your football career? Was there a moment where something really kind of happened, which changed your life, changed your outlook, changed the way that you performed in some way? Have you got like a moment, a memory like this, Piero?
So there's probably a few, but ones that stick out. When I left Watford, wasn't kind of like bitter in any way or upset, or it was just kind of, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But that gave me the side of knowing this isn't easy, and it didn't make me. It allowed me not to take the rest that come after for granted, because I was so close to being out of the game. So that was kind of a good reality check early on to make sure kind of this is difficult, and every contract you get is difficult to earn, and you deserve it. It's a privilege. Yeah. So that early on allowed me and shaped my mindset, which probably helped me with maybe stuff now with kind of coming out of the game, because I knew that early doors that in one way I'm not always going to rely on football. Yeah. Because I saw how easy you can just be out. Yeah. So it allowed me to kind of maybe keep my eye on other stuff and develop other stuff. And in that sense, I think that actually helped me for later on years. Yeah. And game-wise, there's one game where I was at Accrington, manager left, new manager come in, and I played 40 games the season before, and then I was just completely out of the team, wasn't even making the bench. So that was kind of obviously like difficult. Yeah. And kept training hard. And then an opportunity fell on my lap really, where it was an FA Cup game, replay. And some of the boys that got brought in on loan that the manager had worked with before, and they were doing really, really well, they couldn't play because they were cup tied, or because their parent club wouldn't let them play. Right. So all of a sudden, in probably the biggest game of the season, FA Cup replay, I was starting. Yeah. So from not making the bench to starting. And basically there, I knew I was playing I wouldn't say, I don't know, maybe my career, but definitely my time at that club.
Yeah.
And I managed to channel everything in the right manner. And looking back, it was quite big. Yeah. Because kind of your future's on this one game, basically. You've had no chances. Yeah. You're not really kind of being considered, and you mess this up, or you don't play well, which could be understandable as well because you've been out not really playing. Yeah, yeah. You're kind of done, really. And then just played really well. Fantastic. Gave it my all, but looking back, because obviously there's been other instances where maybe I gave it my all, but it was more desperation and wanted it too much, and it kind of actually has a negative effect. Definitely. That game, it seemed like giving it your all, but almost having nothing to lose. Yeah. And it actually kind of went in my favour. It's a weird one looking back and thinking about it. Yeah. And then, played well there. Then all of a sudden, I'm in the mix. I started the next game, scored 2 goals. Really? And then for that manager, that season and the season after, I think I ended up, after I left the club, I had a run of 98 starts in a row. Whoa. As a winger. Nice. So it showed how the manager obviously maybe didn't know me or didn't think I was good enough at the start, but eventually become the manager that probably played me the most in my career. That's fantastic. And as you're saying there, many people, I've spoken to a few people on this podcast who in a moment similar to what you're describing there, whether it's in football or swimming or athletics or a different sport, all athletes have that moment that you're talking about there, don't where there's a lot riding on something, and the kind of like those make or break moments, and often people can't handle that situation, but as you were saying, I think you briefly mentioned there that there was maybe some other occasions similar where you didn't quite get it right up here potentially, and you wanted it too much. And I'm curious if we can kind of just delve into that a little bit. How was it that you felt that you did it? How was it that you got it right on that day? When you look back at it now and remember that game, what was it that was different about those other moments where you didn't quite hit that zone, what I call the flow state, which is, essentially one of the key techniques that help athletes is getting into a state of flow, which is essentially what you were talking about there in that game, is that you were able to get in a state of flow where the anxious mind, the freeze, fight or flight mechanism of the brain has been turned off. Because as soon as that gets turned on, as soon as the limbic system, the amygdala, as soon as that gets ramped up, as soon as it kind of starts to perceive in any way subconsciously that there could be some danger there, it will change your whole neurophysiology, and your performance starts to turn into frustration, aggression, doubts and nerves. But on this occasion, it seems like you played in the absence of those feelings. Would that be correct? Yeah, I think it's a case of maybe at the time feeling wronged about being put out of the team and felt like I should be playing because I've played in this team with the same players, barring one or two, the whole season before. So maybe that kind of confidence of I should be playing. Yeah. And also I think it's just a case of how worse can it get? What's the worst that can happen? I'll go back to not playing. I've been doing that. So it's kind of just go for it. Nothing because the worst, you've been doing the worst for the last 2 months or month. So, and maybe I didn't think beyond my contract or something. Like maybe when I'm older, I'll start thinking of other stuff, more responsibilities. But at the time, I didn't think of if my contract ends, where am I going to go? Or so it kind of just maybe just thinking of in the moment, have a go, because you've been doing the worst, as in you haven't been involved at all. You're not making the bench. So in a football squad, there isn't much worse than that.
I think, what you're alluding to there, one of the biggest challenges that the athletes who I work with, who are having trouble, whether it's for a smaller period of time or longer periods of time, is that if you lose control over your mind, it will start to flick to the worst case scenario. What happens if this goes wrong? What happens, if I make a mistake? What happens if, my career's over here? What happens if my funding gets cut? And if that gets into the mind, if internally, anybody, but if athletes start having those conversations, those patterns of thought, those thoughts that they have, that then starts to trigger a feeling associated to it, a feeling of doubt. And then they've gone through this cycle of thinking about it, and they could have been thinking about it for days, leading up to it. And then they go in to perform, and those thoughts have created a neurophysiological state. And one of the key takeaways that I want anybody listening and all the athletes who I work with is that there's only two things that's two key things which is driving your ability to perform, and it's the thoughts that you're thinking and the internal pictures, movies that you're making inside of your mind, because our feelings and experiences in life are governed by our sensory system, what you're seeing in front of you, and also what you're seeing inside your head, which can be two different things. Imagining yourself, in a penalty shootout, and there'll be athletes who they can't get that image out of the head of them missing or the goalkeeper saving it, and then they go up and take the kick, and guess what? They miss it or they save it, or they're having the thoughts about whatever I do here. I can't miss this. I don't want to let anybody down. And as soon as either of those two things come into the mind, it starts to create a neurophysiological state, doubt, nerves, and to the brain, essentially it's fear. It's a threat. It could be a threat to your career, a threat to your kind of identity as an athlete. If I miss this, are people going to think that I'm not up to it good enough? And in that moment for that game, it really seems that you had control of yourself subconsciously. You weren't looking past that game, so you weren't doubting what might go wrong. You weren't getting carried away in terms of a positive sense. You were able just to be in the moment, and athletes who can consistently perform in the moment and in a state of flow, that's where their great performances, come from. And it certainly seems like you was kind of tapping into that state for that game.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, all those factors come into play, and fortunately it went my way. And then, like I say, it was the start of a very good journey that continued. And
after, did you stay at Accrington for 4 years? Was it?
2013 to 3 years, 3 seasons.
Yeah, and then where did you move on to from then?
Then I came back down south and I went to Cambridge for 2 years.
Yeah, and how, when you compare your time at Accrington to Cambridge, how would you compare those two moments in your career? Was one of them better than the other? Was your performance? Was you able to be more consistent with your performance at one place than another? Or
so I think obviously Accrington, I was there a bit longer, and it ended really well. It ended on a high. The last season, the team doing really well. We just missed out on promotion. So that kind of carried on when I went to Cambridge and started off pretty well. And the first season was pretty good. Actually, numbers-wise, kind of, let's say, goals and assists was probably my best season out of all of them.
Yeah.
And then the second season was a bit more difficult. because there was a change in the way we played. So I was trying to get back into the team, playing in a different position, which I felt I could do, but it wasn't expressing the best of what I had to offer, if I'm being honest. So that was kind of a challenge in trying to find a way of being useful and valuable, even in a new position. And then I got injured towards the end, halfway through the season, and unfortunately I didn't manage to kick a ball again until next season.
Oh gosh. And I guess injuries, that's the curse of the athlete, where in those moments where maybe the mental side of sport really kind of tests you even more. I'd imagine that was a challenging period for you there, where you kind of feel like you was on the crest of a wave, getting consistent with your performance, and then that kind of was halted there, and then you're out of the team, and then you're trying to get yourself back in there, and other people are obviously vying for your same spot. I'd imagine for you that was quite a challenging period as well, mentally.
It was a weird injury where we couldn't. It took a while to kind of get to the bottom of it, and I'm probably not sure we actually ever did. It wasn't anything major, but it was just constant, kind of like chronic pain, really. Which then after that, kind of disappeared. Really? It was a weird one. Like I say, it wasn't like a huge injury you'd expect most, but it was just in a weird place, and we couldn't work out what it was for quite a while, and then just kind of trying to have injections and other forms of medication to calm it down. But again, didn't play, unfortunately, for the last few months of the season, which was gutting, because in the day your contract's running out, you want to show that you can obviously still be part of the team and impress. But like that, you can't really expect to get a new deal if you haven't really been playing. So
when you look back through your career, do you think that you were able to maximize and reach your potential? Do you think obviously everybody has moments where they don't, but do you think on the whole, do you feel that you was able to reach your potential and maximize your potential?
Probably not. I don't think so. Considering I'm like extremely proud of my career, of a few hundred games in various leagues and various teams up and down the country. So, like I say, extremely proud. But the more I learn as I got older, and now to the stuff I'm into, I realize there's levels, especially to your mindset. And you speak to anyone I worked with, honest, hardworking, reliable, so pretty much kind of the basics that you'd like in a player. So you think you're doing all you can, but there's more. There's more, and you see that with some prime examples at the top of the game. You can squeeze out a hell of a lot more. And that's what I'm trying to help people that I speak to, younger players or people that are still playing, that I'm still friends with. Is you've got more, trust me. Because I thought I was doing all I can, but then when you actually look back, you think, no, there's a hell of a lot more. So that's why it fascinates me now to push as much as I can in whatever I do.
Amen to that. Definitely, Piero. For me, human potential is almost limitless. Delving into the power of the brain and the mind for these last 15 years is really, it's changed me as a person. Learning the things that I've learned, learning how the mind seriously can make or break you. It can, when you tap into the mind and get it fueled, get it operating in the way that it's supposed to, you can be unstoppable. However, unfortunately, so many people, myself, I've had those moments. You get held back by your mind. The thing that holds people back more than anything is their mind. It's in terms of sport, it's the body doing the kicking, the pulling, the throwing, the catching, whatever it may be. But everything in behind all of that is the brain controlling that. You've got all these various different regions of the brain, controlling that, and a big thing is, belief being one of them. And the stories that people tell themselves. This is something that I really like to work on with athletes. Is what is your story? And what's the story that you're repeating to yourself inside your head? Like you were saying there, like, in the middle of your career, you thought you were giving everything, but you were convincing yourself of that. Now looking back, you realize, I could have gone deeper. I could have gone further. I could have given more. And in that moment, perhaps just wasn't able to, challenge yourself inwardly to be honest enough for yourself, perhaps, to kind of admit that maybe. And often.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I don't think, like I said, it's more of a case of, I was actually one of the good ones in that sense of like hard working and giving everything for the team. So it was never like a lack of effort. But now I look back and I understand it a bit more. It was a case of setting new targets.
Yeah.
The biggest goal for me was to become a professional footballer. I'd done that and I was being a professional footballer, playing week in, week out. I didn't set new goals. Yeah. To go, I want to go to this league or I want to go to this place. Yeah. So then eventually, the level I have to do to get into the team is there. The level I have to work at if I want to go to a certain league is up there. Yeah. My goal was always just to get in the team. Yeah. And so you almost get to a ceiling of I'm doing what I'm setting out to do. Yeah. Get into the team, play 40 games a season. I don't see nothing wrong with that. But now I look back and with new other things I'm doing, of when I set target a bit further away of how I get there, and you think that's why I'm passionate about what I'm doing, because I wish I had someone to kind of help me. Yeah. To open the mind, or kind of the mind in that way. Say to me, like, where are you going? Yeah. You've done well there, whatever. Where are you going now? Where are you looking to go? Yeah. Because that alone is powerful in itself. Definitely. And that's what I was trying to get across, essentially, like through a belief that you had about where your career and where you were going, you'd limited yourself with almost like a belief of your target that you'd set yourself, you achieved it. And tied to that target is beliefs about yourself, beliefs about what you're capable of. Yeah. And so that's what I was referring to. And once somebody has a belief about themselves or somebody else or something, that belief is like a magnet. You will attract to it that belief. A simple way to look at it is, if you have a belief that I love the color red, then you're going to go out into the world, and whenever you see something red, you're going to look out for it. And you go, oh, that red car, that red top, that red whatever, I love it. And that's to the exclusion of everything yellow, blue, green, black, and beliefs are like that. And unless you challenge your own beliefs and unless you change them, and that's a big, one of the big struggles that athletes and people have, is that they don't know how to change a belief, and how do you change your belief? And so a lot of the work that I do is helping people changing beliefs, that often the limiting beliefs that they have about themselves. And also, as you say, setting those targets and
how to set a target, because the mind does not know the difference between what you imagine and what you actually see. Hence why when we've all had those, dreams which feel real, whether they're a nightmare, or not. And in that moment when you're asleep, seeing what you're seeing and hearing what you're hearing and feeling what you're feeling, it feels real. And yet you're asleep just seeing all this stuff in your head. And so when somebody sets targets, if you really want to, solidify a target inside your mind, you need to know how to anchor it in there, how to imprint it into your mind, so that this new target, this new belief about what you want to achieve, so that you as a person is driven towards it, to go after it, and then set the next one and set the next one and set the next one. And if you don't have that continual process of setting a target, achieving it, going to the next one, then in the end you stagnate. But unfortunately, you can't stagnate, because the world isn't like that. You're either growing or you're going the other way. You're either getting better or you're getting worse, because whilst you're stagnating, you've got a bunch of other people that are going beyond you, and that's pushing you.
Fully agree.
Down. I'm curious as to know, in terms of, in your opinion, and with football, how much of this game do you feel is mental, and how much of it do you feel is physical? If you could put that into percentage, what do you, where would you put it in that kind of spectrum?
So definitely more mental than physical.
Really?
Yeah. Percentage wise, I don't want to exaggerate and kind of do, because at the end of the day, you need both.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about this, we're talking about physical still being of a very good standard, right?
Of course, yeah.
Because we're not going to make it like, you don't need any physically, but as long as you've got unbelievable mindset, you can play at Old Trafford. Yeah.
You can be the most motivated, driven person in the world, but if you haven't got the ability, you haven't got the ability, have you? That takes physical effort and time and energy, doesn't it? But if I can, I would like to push you on your opinion on that, on those two things. What percent physical, what percent mental?
So considering, of course, that both mental and physical of the relevant standard of other professionals, or of the standard needed, I'd say 70% mental.
Really?
Yeah. I think, and it's one of the things I look back was the things I could have improved on, or I wish I had help with, was confidence, self-belief at certain times.
Yeah.
And physically, I would have been in great shape. But like you say, it starts from the mind, and it's like someone had a handbrake on me in some games. If I look back, when you go through a bit of a sticky patch, when you're not as confident, your body hasn't changed. Your ability on the ball hasn't changed.
No.
It's not like you forget how to pass the ball or how to shoot.
Yeah.
But there's something obviously in your head.
Yeah.
And it's like I say, it's like playing with the handbrake.
It is. I use that analogy myself with the work that I do. If you have a limiting belief, it is like getting in a car and having one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. And when they are conflicting beliefs, and one of them will be to step out into whatever sports arena that someone is playing, whether it's in this pool, the track, a court, a pitch. Obviously you want to step out there and play to the best of your ability. But if on the other hand, at a subconscious level, if you have a limited belief, if at some level you're questioning yourself, am I really good enough? Does my coach think I'm good enough? Or again, those moments where you put extra pressure and expectation on yourself because, I need this contract now, I need to perform here. And if and when an athlete has allowed that belief to come in, they will struggle to find consistency in their performance, because it's there. it's there, like, you know, like just tapping away, and it might disappear when everything is going good. But when the pressure comes on, when, you know, an error or a mistake is made or something different is going on, that's when it rears its ugly head. And the doubts come in, and then the doubts lead to lack of confidence, and then people start overthinking. And as you say, you know, you simply can't get away from the fact that you physically, technically, and tactically have to be good enough. But why is it then that for 2-3 weeks you can be up at this level, and then you can be down there? You haven't lost your ability in that period of time, have you?
Not at all.
And
it's funny that if you ask someone when they've had a really good game, kind of, how did you do it, or what did you do, they probably say, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's because obviously they're in that state of mind where it's the state of mind where you want to be. It's kind of like instinctive, just letting your instincts do the thing. But then if they have a bad game or they've got no confidence, they can tell you every bad pass, every bad touch, because they're literally, the focus has just gone into every tiny little detail.
Yeah.
Which in a football match, you got to be super strong to analyze every touch and come through the other side, because there's too many things happening all in one go. So there needs to be that bit of freedom and that bit of instinct. That you just kind of let it go.
Yeah. And you know, when I'm working with athletes, teaching them how to perform in a state of flow, that's exactly what's happening. You're not actually thinking, you're not analysing, because when you add up how many thousands of hours you spent kicking that football, you've learned so many skills. They're they get ingrained into the cerebellum at the back of the brain. That's where we store all of our skills, our ability to walk, throw, catch, you know, juggle a football, you know, volley a football, catch it, whatever, you know, a ball, whatever it is, they're stored at the back of the mind. And once you have repeated those patterns, those physical patterns, as you're repeating them physically with your body, you're also ingraining them, you know, habitually and neurologically into the mind. And once you've done that enough, they're in there, they're done. But then doubt, fear, anxiety, it affects that we have what are called schemas, you know. So for every skill that we have learned, we have a schema, which is essentially a movie in our subconscious mind of how you perform that skill. And what happens when doubt and fear comes in and anxiety is that movie that they play in their head, it becomes jerky. It is it's not as smooth, it's not as clear. And as you were saying there, that you actually touched on, you know, one of the key questions that I ask the athletes is, how do you do it? You know, how are you doing it? And when you ask them, you actually, with careful guidance, you can guide an athlete back into the state. So, you know, if you take one of your footballers and, you know, can you remember one of the best performances you've had? You know, and they'll start to remember it. And then there are ways that you can help get that athlete, that footballer, back into that state. And when they're there, ask them, right, how are you doing it? How are you doing it? And by doing that, they have to go internally. And if they close their eyes, they'll be able to look at that memory of that performance and describe it. And then if you compare that to a time when they didn't play well and ask them how they did it, when they compare those two movies inside their mind, they're completely different. Everything is different. And one of the key things that I do with my clients is first of all getting them to notice the difference between what their best performance looks like subconsciously and what their underperformances look like. And when you change that underperformance so it looks, sounds, and feels like the same as the better one, then you're really on your way to massively transforming your performance. because what you want, both of those performances are linked to a neurophysiological state. That's what it is. It's one state of mind when you're at your best, one state of mind when you're not. And the key is to be able to get yourself into that state and out of that one as fast as you can.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, definitely. How would you perform mentally before you go out? You went out to perform. Would you have kind of like a routine? Would you do anything in particular to try to, get yourself into that state of mind that you wanted to be to perform at your best? Was there anything that you did in particular?
I think in particular was visualization.
Yeah.
I used to imagine myself in certain areas of the pitch.
Yeah.
Let's say as a winger, in and around the box and getting half a yard and crossing the ball. It wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
No one told me to do it.
No.
But now I know what it is.
Yeah.
That's what I used to do. I used to just imagine little scenarios in the games or me having the ball in certain positions. And that was when I was playing probably my best football. So really? That obviously was a strong tool. Yeah.
Yeah. As I was saying earlier, the mind doesn't know the difference. What you was imagining there before you was playing, your mind does not know the difference. It doesn't know if that was real. It doesn't know the difference between that and you actually going doing it. And there's been a lot of, numerous studies looking at that very fact. It's been done with piano players, it's been done with basketballers, it's been done with weightlifters, lifting weights, where they take two groups. One of them goes away and practices for 2 to 4 weeks on the lifting, the weights for 30 minutes a day, 3-4 times a week. Or the other group, or same with the basketball, practicing for 30 minutes, 3 times a week. And then they have the other group who do not do anything physical. They don't lift a weight. They do not throw a basketball, and they go away for 3-4 weeks and they come back. Sorry, missed a step out. Before they did anything, they measured what they was good at, what they was doing. So how many free throws could you make out of 100?
Yeah.
How many reps could you do with this particular weight? And then they went away and did that. And when they then bring them back in, the difference between what the group that did it all physically versus the group which did it just through visualizing, you're talking 1 or 2% different, which is mind blowing. And this other guy, this really clever guy, I've forgotten his name, Jose something. He, it's annoying me that I've forgotten his name. It'll come back to me at some point. He was the first guy, and he was, well, this guy, what's it called? Yeah, he wasn't a psychologist. He wasn't, a lecturer or anything like that. But he was like a successful electrician, built up his own business and became very successful. And he was kind of looking around at his family and his sons, daughters, his wife, and all his family members that they were not, and he couldn't understand it. He tried to, work at trying to change their mentality, and it was just not for changing. And then, long story short, because he'd amassed a decent amount of wealth, he actually then took his own money and paid for a university to study this very thing. And he was one of the first people to actually add on a third group to that experiment. So you had the group which practiced physically, the group which practiced mentally, obviously a fourth group which did nothing. But then he added on the fourth group, where he then had a group who did it mentally and physically. So they would physically go and practice, mentally go and rehearse it. And then when they put them back together, that group weight, combined them both together, their performances went through the roof. So, when you learn how to visualize and the neuroscience techniques that I teach athletes, that's one of the key skills is how to actually do it. And, there's just doing what you did there. You was doing an element of it, but there's ways to really kind of hone in on that and fully imprint that into the mind. So it becomes real second nature when you step out on that pitch.
Definitely.
Did you, during your career, at Watford, Accrington, and Cambridge and the other clubs, did you get much mental performance coaching, much sports psychology during that time? Was there any? How much time was given to it from the coaches and the clubs themselves? Sorry, the line broke up there, Piero. Could you just say that again, please?
Me?
Oh. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we're back on. I think it was just a momentary glitch.
No problem. So yeah, like I said, I don't remember any, to be honest.
Yeah.
Nothing and specific towards it.
And this is what I've been finding, over the last 10, 12 years, especially, is that, when I ask the question, which is why I ask it at the beginning, what percentage of elite performance is physical and what percent is mental? Quite often people are saying 70-30, like you said. But then when you ask them how much time they spent mentally, developing themselves mentally and psychologically, that time is pretty much zero. Obviously you worked in some elements yourself with your own visualization, but clubs and sports organizations aren't investing that time into that. And I'm really believe that they're missing out there by not investing the time, because it saves time. It saves time physically. It's that. It gives you that ability to cut some corners in many respects, because if you plan out in your mind, your performance is ahead of time, and you've seen that performance, 10 times before you go and play, then again, to your mind, you've played this match against this team 10 times. So it becomes, second nature almost. And there are techniques that athletes can use where you can literally speed up the processing of time inside your mind, so that your mind actually can literally fast forward through time and play a full 90 minutes. And it feels like to the mind you've played 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's been like 20, 30 seconds. But the brain does not know the difference between that. And when if more sports clubs and more athletes started investing time into this, they would find that they will really be able to take their performances to another level. And also, with the amount of training that you would have been doing in between all the matches and what athletes are doing in other sports, reducing your physical training by 2 hours would often be a benefit, to give the body that time to recover. And if you could replace that with some mental performance techniques, it's almost win-win for me anyway. In my world, I don't know what you would think about that.
Yeah, of course, it can only have a positive effect. One thing I would like to say is that I think there's a stigma attached to it, especially now when it comes to mental health. And I think if players hear psychology and even stuff that I'm doing with like coaching and performance coaching and stuff like that, I think they think there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
But it's not about having anything wrong with you. It's about getting better and finding places to get better. Where as soon as you talk about mindset or mental, because of obviously the huge mental health stuff going on, a lot of players go on the back foot and say, "No, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me." And they need to understand there's differences. When we hear psychology, it's not always because you've got something wrong with you that you need to fix.
That's a great point.
It's also you're here, but if you understand these things, you can go to there.
Yeah.
But a lot of time when it comes to around mental stuff, mindset, the first thought is, I don't need it because there's nothing wrong with me, which of course is the completely wrong approach.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, it's not about something being wrong with somebody. And often people have been living with a certain way of thinking, acting, behaving and feeling. And that's just who they are.
It's just normal, yeah.
Yeah. But what they don't realize is that on the other side of that is a version of themselves which is far greater and far more powerful. But it's that fear of the unknown as well. Many people say the number one function of the brain is to keep you alive. But there's a woman who worked with families and in the family therapy kind of world who really saw that differently. And she believes that Virginia Satire, she's called. And I would recommend you looking into her.
Check her out.
Yeah. In her opinion, the number one function of the brain, of the mind, is to keep things familiar. Because if we operate on patterns, our mind is pattern recognition in all the time. Mm-hmm. It just repeats what it knows. And if it didn't have that ability, then every day we'd wake up and we'd have to start again and learn it new. So you repeat something a few times, and then it gets logged in the brain and it generalizes it. This is what this means. This is how I do that. This person is this type of person. And often, whether you're an athlete or just a human being, people don't want to change out of the fear of the unknown. It's out of that comfort zone. What if I change and, what if I change and I get worse and my performance drops, that sort of thing. And that's part of it, not wanting to step outside of themselves and dare to take that risk of, on the other side of myself is something even better. It certainly seems like this is something that you're trying to get across to your athletes, your footballers that you're working with.
Yeah, because I just believe it's like there's a holistic approach, and there isn't just one thing that is the magic trick. It's a combination of everything to a high standard. And I think coming back, the fear of changing it's basically down to fear, really. People are just so ingrained, let's say athletes or footballers, because it's the area that I know best, that you get to yourself at a point that you've been doing certain things for so long.
Yeah.
That you're scared to come away from it.
Yeah.
Just in case, like you say, you play bad.
Yeah.
So you just will never try it. And most people just know, I eat this at this time, I do this at this time.
Yeah.
And most of the time, once you get to a certain age, you're just doing it because you've always done it.
Yeah.
But you don't actually question, is this still benefiting me?
Yeah.
Or is there a different way? Or is there a better way?
Yeah.
And it needs to come away from that fear of, if you do change and 2 days later you have a bad game, that might not necessarily be linked. Yeah. You could have had a bad game anyway.
Yeah.
But someone would change maybe part of their pre-match meal, have a bad game, and they'll be like, I can't have that again.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of superstition, isn't there, in sport? The lucky socks, putting one shin pad on first, one boot on, tying your legs like this, and people tie that familiar pattern to security. But it's all hocus pocus nonsense, unfortunately. But it helps derive a sense of belief in that, and a sense of security. But that those things are never really. They do play a part. They can play a part. But it's not the thing that's driving your performance. It's all those hours you've spent developing your skills.
I think it's a case of, again, they might work and for some people, but it's just a case of always questioning what you're doing, and seeing if it's the best thing for you. Because, like, for example, for myself, let's say my dream was to become a professional footballer. I was set in my ways, doing certain things. Again, that took me to a certain level. If I needed to go there, obviously I have to change, or I should have changed certain things, but my patterns were ingrained. So if you would have said to me, are you doing all you can? I would have said yes. But I'm doing all I can to get to there. So I wasn't even looking at there after like maybe a certain age or a certain period. When you're younger though, coming through, you're doing everything. But then when you get to that level, then I think you need to have the self-awareness to, where am I going now? What else can I do?
Definitely.
Which I didn't have that kind of, that not guidance, but it didn't, like I said, for most people, you get to a certain age in football and it's just getting the team that I'm at, play hopefully 30, 40 games, get a new contract. And it just becomes that sort of cycle. And that's what I'm trying to help people avoid. Especially as they get older, because there's just so much more in the tank.
Definitely. One of the questions that I was going to ask you, and you've touched on that really, Piero, is during your career, did you ever have a habit or habits which you couldn't or struggled to break, which affected your performance? And I think, you're touching on it there, that there's probably a few habits or patterns, ways of thinking, ways of being that kind of put you in a box that at that time perhaps you weren't quite able to see outside of. Would that ring true, do you think?
I think so. Obviously, when you're going great and you're confident and playing well, or brilliant, I think in times, if I look back, maybe at times when I having sticky periods, it was caring too much about maybe what the manager thought or teammates, or I don't know, and it's just kind of putting too much pressure on yourself in that sense. I think I was guilty of that when I was going through difficult periods.
And a couple of people who I've worked with, that was a real challenge for them, being able to get past the perceived opinions of their coach, the person that's going to put them in the team, because what can happen is that you're stepping out on the training pitch and stepping out on the pitch to perform, and in your mind you've got this image of or sounds of a coach, that you're thinking that they're actually saying to you about you, or you're even actually hearing these things really, whilst you're playing, and you're never going to be able to perform to your best if in the back of your mind you're thinking about what the coach thinks about you. Does he think I'm good enough? Does he think I can do this or that? As soon as your mind goes away from yourself and onto something else, then it's pulling you out of that state of flow, that zone, because it's creating doubt, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was never a case of thinking, does the coach think I'm good enough? Or because most of the coaches I worked with, I had brilliant relationships with, but it was just kind of a case of fear of coming out of the team. If I was playing and you're not playing well, that fear sometimes will get too much and then you freeze.
Yeah, definitely. And that, going back to what I was talking about earlier, that as soon as you have doubts, as soon as you have, that low level anxiety, when you break it all down, doubt, nerves, pressure, it is fear. And to the subconscious mind, that will trigger that primal part of the brain, the limbic system, that monkey brain, if you like, and when that happens, as soon as the subconscious mind starts to perceive a threat, real or not, your options are to fight, flight, freeze in that moment. But what the thing that you really want to be doing is taking the fourth option, is moving into a state of flow. And, in your best performances, you was in a state of flow. In those performances where you couldn't quite get to that level, you may have even froze in the moment. Your performance got jerky. It became rigid, and you was having to overthink.
Go safe.
Yeah, and your thought processes go safe, don't they? You start to make safe passes. You start to make safe decisions, and then you're not being your true self.
Yeah, then there's no good for no one.
No. Did you think you had any limiting beliefs about yourself, which could have, got in the way of you achieving more from your career in football?
Not really.
No.
I'm super small, so probably people tell me I'm too small to make it, whatever you consider make it. That's a subject for another day. But to maybe play, I don't know, 250, 300 games, whatever they were at those levels. So that was kind of maybe people trying to put their beliefs on me, and something I never adhered to.
Brilliant.
Because I know I could handle it.
Yeah.
The only thing maybe as you get a bit older, and let's say I played majority of my games at League Two, you maybe start attaching yourself to the level, possibly.
Yeah.
Where you say, oh, well, I'm just a League Two player.
Yeah.
Because I've played most of my games. And you might well be, but I don't think to try and completely get rid of that till later on. And while you're still any age really, when you think about it. But yeah, don't get attached to the level maybe, and believe that that's just you, and that's where you're going to be playing. So maybe that.
Yeah.
But yeah, apart from that, like I said, the external one when you're coming through is, too small. When you hear that everywhere about being too small.
Yeah.
And I like I said, I played most of my games in League Two, which is over the years kind of you say hustle and bustle league, kind of maybe not the prettiest of football. So if I manage to kind of carve out a career playing those type of games, then that knocked it on the head.
But that is still an incredible achievement to have played all those games at that level, isn't it? When you, and this is one of the things that I really strive to work with athletes to realize about themselves, that where you are, the number of people that you have beaten off to get in that position, the thousands of, and especially in football, the number of people that you have fought off, fended off, outperformed to get to that level, to get to and consistently perform in League Two. That is still it's a tiny number that ever even get to do what you did, isn't it? Yeah,
it's extremely difficult to just carve out a career in football. It's something I'm very proud of, and it's something that is actually giving me belief with my next chapter. And why I've maybe jumped into it sooner rather than later, because I'm still only 30 years old, and I stopped playing 6-7 months ago, whatever it is. And if I didn't have that belief of where I can go with what I'm doing next, I would have carried on playing. Yeah. But part of it is I set myself a target to become a professional footballer, and I achieved it. So part of my, let's say, work in my head is, what did you do and what traits and attributes did you dedicate to get to that goal?
Yeah.
And can you find them again?
Yeah.
And adapt it to something new. So that's one of my beliefs, is if I can do that, and I know how hard it is, then there isn't many things that I can even say I can't do.
Yeah.
And it's just in a way of, there isn't many things harder than that, in all honesty. So I'd be silly to limit myself. And it's something that I've tried to work on, to actually see opportunities and see the bigger picture.
Yeah. And you've touched on a question that I was going to ask you a little bit towards the end, but let's go there now. You've pretty much said it, really. But, how has your sporting career, how has it helped you in life outside of that? And obviously, you're moving on to something new now, which we'll talk about, very shortly. But yeah, how is what you've learned from being that young boy with a dream, a passion, an ambition, and then you've gone on and gained all this experience, how is this helping you in throughout your career outside of football, and how is it helping you now with your new venture, with what you're doing?
So having a career in sport, you have to be in it for quite a few years to consider having a career. So automatically you come away with hard work, determination, resilience, being able to take criticism, feedback in many variations, sometimes polite, sometimes not very polite.
Yeah.
There's so many things that you have to go through that you don't even realize, and you just take for granted, which maybe doesn't actually happen, maybe, let's say, in the real world.
Yeah.
And they're all stuff that you need to tap into and understand that they're strengths.
Yeah.
And they will help you have possibly an advantage in whatever you want to go and do, if you match up the skill set needed for that specific industry or business or career.
Yeah.
You've got the stuff that you can't really go to the shop and buy. You can't go and do a course on resilience, I don't think, because for me, it all comes down to the experiences you had to go through. And a career is like a 10-year football career is almost like some people's 30, 40 years of life cramped into that short period.
Yeah.
The stuff you have to go through is extremely difficult. But if you get through it, and you will get through it, it turns out to be a huge, huge benefit.
Yeah. Fantastic. Piero. Can we spend some time talking about, life after football and what you're doing now and what your ambitions are with your new project? Could you explain to myself and anyone else watching what it is that you're wanting to do? It really seems that you've got a sense of purpose and passion to give back to football and footballers in some way. Yeah.
So the main stuff I do for myself is a mixture of football coaching. So obviously the typical kind of technical, tactical, and that sort of stuff. So I do that with kids from 5, 6 to adults that just love playing football but want to feel like they're being trained like a professional.
Yeah.
That, and then alongside that, I'm passionate about the performance coaching, life coaching, whatever you want to call it, to help people find that extra that we've been talking about for the last hour and 15, just finding levels that they didn't know they had.
Yeah.
And again, I always dedicate time for footballers, because I have a bias towards them, because I've experienced it, I just know it inside out, and I always hope that people can go on and do extremely well.
Yeah.
But also people in other industries and other careers that maybe they feel like they got no more to give, but they've they just haven't asked the right questions, or they haven't looked at it from the right angle.
Yeah.
So that's extremely important to me, because especially as people get older, get to certain ages and they start to question what they're doing, where they're going, and sometimes they put age maybe as a limiting belief. And I don't want people to do stuff that they don't feel like they need to do.
Yeah.
Or they feel like they're not got a purpose out of it.
Yeah.
I want people to to enjoy Monday mornings instead of dreading Monday. I don't think that's a way that you should be living. I don't think, because you've got all the resources inside of you. And for me, it's just a lack of understanding of how to get it out. So if I can help you get those answers out, or that purpose, that motivation, or that thing that you really want to do out, and how to get there, then that's a huge benefit to whoever I work with.
That's great, Piero. And you touched on something which certainly resonates me with there when you mentioned about resources. We all have, no matter where you get to, no matter what you achieve, you've always got another level. And I certainly strive to embrace that. I want to set myself goals that I can't achieve, because that's what's going to give me the desire to wake up every day and move forwards and keep growing and keep learning. And we all have the resources to achieve excellence. We have these resources. It's unfortunately often our past, things that have happened in the past have created these limiting beliefs, these blockages, which kind of close the door in the mind to themselves about what they can or can't do. And out of the fear of failure, out of the fear of being rejected, out of the fear of not being good enough, essentially. And you've got some fantastic experiences, from within football, as you say, that can really help people to, navigate their way, whether it's in sport or whether it's outside of sport. So, it really sounds like you're working on some great stuff there, Piero.
Yeah, like I said, something I'm very passionate about. Something I would have enjoyed, or I would have definitely benefited from at a certain period in my career.
Yeah.
But I want to give that to like I say, people in business, in other industries, and in sport, just because, like you say, deep down there is levels, and people just need to find out where to get the answers to get there. And one thing as well, that now I'm out of playing, I try and explore as much as possible.
Yeah.
I try, they're my main things that I focus on for myself, but I'm constantly trying to network, try different roles in the game, and just try stuff, because I was in this one kind of thing for so long that I never had the opportunity to try different roles or talk to different people. It takes so much out of you.
Yeah.
That most of the time you don't even think about anything else.
Yeah.
Which I think up to a certain age, you might get away with it. But then as you get older, you do need to start slowly implementing other things. Yeah. Because it just makes I don't want to say transition, I'll say evolution from playing to your next target. Yeah. Just makes it smoother. So I do try and explore other things if I have time. Yeah. And I leave the door open to most things. I don't, like I say, I'm willing to learn and to get in front of most people, because it's an enjoyment. It's a pleasure. Definitely.
We're not put on this planet to just survive, Piero. We're here to thrive. We're here to come into this world and experience, as much as we can and enjoy life. And unfortunately, life can beat people down in some respects to, a poor start in life, some challenging events. And, we want to be spending as much time we can, growing and learning. And you said something that I say a lot, certainly to some of my friends that I never close the door on any possibility. Just leave that door ajar, because as soon as you shut the door, essentially, you've created a limiting belief there. This isn't possible. I can't do this, or this person is that, and that's never true. It's a dangerous game to play. I can only do this, I'm only capable of that. And as you say, I found it, really cool how you use the same phrase as I do, just leave that door open to the possibility of
always
of anything, What was as a footballer your superpower? And this could have been like a technical element, a tactical element, fitness base. It could have been a mentality, a habit, a trait, or belief. What would you say was your superpower? Like one or maybe two things which helped you to get to where you got to?
Very good question. I think that the mentality helped me get to where I got to, because I just didn't, even in the tough times which you're going to have, I never most of the time I let it just brush off me.
Yeah.
Clubs let you go, or I just kind of accepted it pretty quickly and just moved on, and always thinking forward. And again, you go through periods, like you say, when you're lacking confidence or whatever, but overall, just the mentality just to keep going. Good or bad, I'm pretty level-headed. Probably a bit too much. I probably didn't enjoy certain moments as much as I should have, but it was just because I was just constantly thinking about, okay, that's done, on to the next one. But it was like that even in negative situations. I never took anything to heart, to be honest. Managers or fans, I think that's probably my biggest strength is
great.
I just kind of back most things off, unless it comes from people that really, really know me. I think I acknowledge that pretty quickly. That I'm a player and a person, and as long as you can criticize the player, of course it's not nice, but that doesn't really hurt me in a way. But the person, you need to get to know them first before I'll accept an opinion on it.
Definitely, that's great. What a great superpower to have there. It's almost like you was able to create like a force field around yourself, and choose when it was time to accept somebody's opinion, and when it was time to not do. And that is a skill in itself, because if you always reject everybody's advice, then sometimes there might be truth in it. But if every time somebody tells you something about what you're not doing so good at, or if you accept everybody's feedback towards you, which might not always be positive, then it can create a lot of like doubt and self-confusion. So being able to, for you being able to differentiate between that, probably really strengthened your ability to play at the level that you did for those years and play so many games.
Yeah, because I think especially now it's even worse, but if you take every comment or every, not feedback, because feedback's good and I always accept feedback, but I'm saying anything negative that's just kind of like not any use to anyone, but it's just someone's maybe frustration towards you. If you take all of that on board, then something's going to happen nearly every day.
Yeah, exactly.
With training and stuff like that, with teammates, with fans. So just kind of being able to select the ones that you will accept as maybe feedback and that can help you and help the team, or in those ones, but ones that are just someone else's frustration, just don't take it personally, to be honest.
When you look back over your career now, then how do you feel about it? I know
very proud.
Yeah.
Very proud. Yeah. we can always do more, and you can look at what you can do more. But like you say, when you see the numbers, and I can say I played for 12 years, professional. That's extremely difficult. Definitely. And something that no one can take away from me.
Never.
But like I say, it's something that I just genuinely see as the first part of life.
Yeah.
And it's a great start. And now what can I take from that journey to then help the next part?
Definitely. It's just, we get to the end of life and we've written a book, a story, and that story is made up of lots of different chapters. And for you now, this is just, it's a new chapter, isn't it? You know, building on the previous chapters before that, you know, and giving yourself and the wisdom, you know, that you can learn from yourself. And also what you're obviously trying to do now is pass that wisdom on to others, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. I like I say, I genuinely think what I can take from the first chapter hopefully should make the second chapter even better. And it's a genuine belief because, like I say, I stopped playing pretty young. I could have carried on playing for a few more years. Yeah. And I might jump in, you never know. But it's not really my intention, to be honest. Yeah. Just because that belief is that something better could be coming is real. Brilliant.
Fantastic. And beliefs, you know, are so powerful. The fact that you even believe that, you're giving yourself such a huge chance that becomes your reality.
Fingers crossed.
Last couple of questions then. What advice would you give to your former younger self now? So you, as at the age that you are, if you could go back to your, I don't know, the key time in your career, maybe you're like 18, 19, something like that, maybe that sort of age, or you know, around that sort of area. If you could go back now with the wisdom, the things that you've learned, and if you could go back in time and have a conversation with your former self and pass on some information which could have, you know, helped them progress going forward, what would either that or those pieces of information be?
I think it would be good question. $18, $19.
Or it could be later or earlier, you know. Is there something that you got to the end that if you had it when you was younger, that would have really helped you? You know, something that you realized later towards the end of your career, perhaps?
I think find out who you are as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And stick by it.
Yeah.
Because there's a huge risk that you constantly try and change to make other people happy. Maybe potentially managers or just to fit in.
Yeah.
But in the long run, you could potentially lose out.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I'll tell a youngster now, because there's so many things, and I was pretty fortunate, to be honest. I was quite strong in that sense where certain things just didn't maybe sit right with me, or I come from like a good kind of upbringing in that way with strong kind of beliefs. But it wasn't always easy, because sometimes you felt like you had to do something that you didn't really want to do, but it was just to fit in.
Yeah.
It didn't happen too often.
No.
And definitely as I got older, that it was just, I was happy to say no, for example. With things that you can say no, but just if it comes across you as a person, you know what you stand for, and you know what's acceptable. Like as I got older and I'd see managers speak to younger players in certain ways, I just thought that's just wrong. Like, how do you think that's benefiting them?
Yeah.
And things like that. So yeah, just try and find out who you are, which is obviously difficult, but be yourself as much as possible.
Definitely, because you're never going to please everybody. And the more you're living a life based on who you think other people want you to be, the less that you're being yourself, and the less happy you are going to be in yourself and life. Because if you're waking up every day, there's a part of you that knows that you're not being yourself. And deep down, you can't kid yourself forever. In the end, you will. People do come to a point in their life, and whatever that point is, whether it's in those moments before they leave this planet or at some other point in the end.
Definitely.
If you've lived a lie your life trying to appease everybody else, then you've not lived your own life, have you?
No, I fully agree on that.
My last question. What is your definition or meaning of excellence?
For me, there isn't really a marker. And it probably changed for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe when I was younger, you think, that's excellent, or that certain thing means excellent. And for me now, it's just continuous improvement.
Awesome.
That's all I search for. There's no particular end goal, let's say, or particular thing. I think if I get that means it's continuous improvement.
Awesome. Certainly agree with that one there, brother. Definitely. There's somebody who I really admire and acknowledge is a yogi, a guy called Sadhguru. I love the guy, and he has a phrase that he coins often, and it's to live life at full stride and beyond all limitations. And that's the life that I'm wanting to lead. Just go beyond limitations. The only ceiling that exists is the one that you are self-imposing, and sometimes what other people have imposed upon you. And life's about breaking through those ceilings, and just if we as people, whether it's in sport or outside of sport, can live a life of continual infinite growth, then we're going to be happier people. It gives us something to strive for. And as soon as you've put a limit on yourself, this is what I can do. Well, once you then hit that ceiling, where do you go? And if you don't break that, that's what leads to unhappiness, to suffering.
Definitely.
So I think that's a fantastic definition of excellence there, Piero.
No, it's probably changed over the years from when I was younger, but definitely what I'm looking at now. Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to take this opportunity, Piero, to thank you so much for giving up your time and coming on the podcast. It's great connecting with you and really listening to your story and how you've evolved as a person and how you're trying to use your past experiences in sport to not only elevate and grow yourself, but to also help other people do this. And, I'm certain that people watching and listening to this can pick some, fantastic pieces of wisdom and nuggets from you here that can help them, whether that's in football, whether that's in a different sport, or whether it's just life in general. So, really, it's been a real pleasure, meeting with you, Piero, and listening to your fantastic journey and story.
No, absolute privilege. It was a great conversation. We think very deep about certain things, so appreciate that. Thanks for your time.
That's great. So we'll sign off there, Piero. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Thank you.
The Inner Game Podcast, brought to you by the Science of Excellence. Unleash your power. Book your free consultation now.